Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to talk about movies, which, of course, is something that we love here on the show. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in the title. We also love bears, which is in the title, so go figure. We like to think of our show as the perfect pairing of movies and bears, but maybe you be the judge of that. We've got a fun show for you this week. We're going to be reviewing The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the new Cohen Brothers film, currently available on Netflix for you to watch and enjoy. Question mark. But before we get to our discussion of that film, first of all, I want to introduce my co-host, Jim Pugliafico. Hey, babe, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How you doing, babe? Welcome back to Brad to the podcast, who wasn't here last week. But hello, everybody else. How you doing?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. My second order of business, which I will just slot into right now, was to thank you, Jim, for hosting the show in my absence and Will picking up all the extra slack. I know a conversation between two people is a little harder to wrangle sometimes, or maybe it's easier. I don't know, but I appreciate you guys stepping up to share the load while I had to work last week. So thank you for doing that.
We definitely sensed the absence. I mean, it was a little different for us for sure, but we're glad you're back now to kind of, I don't know. It's like paddling with only 1.5 oars or something. I don't know. It was strange.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, we make it work, but like it's best when all three of us are here. Like the trio is triumphant.
The power of three for any Charmed fans. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Hey, you already heard from him too. Will Lindis is with us as well. Hey, Will, how's it going?
Howdy, partners. So Brad, order of business, just because last week we had a chance to talk about two that you weren't here for, and not to kind of drag those up just because, that's a whole other podcast, but any lightning round reviews of Ralph Breaks the Internet or Creed 2 that you'd like to share with our audience? Anything we left on the table?
Ooh, here's what I would say. I think I liked Ralph Breaks the Internet better than Wreck-It Ralph. The Disney princess stuff was probably my favorite part. Also, I pretty much hate everything Sarah Silverman has ever been in or done, but her princess song in the film, totally love it. Redeemed Sarah Silverman for me, except for her Star Trek Voyager thing. I liked her in that one episode. So it was fun. Liked it a lot. Creed 2, didn't like as much as the first Creed film. I mean, I liked it. It was pretty by the numbers, super predictable, but it was great to see Michael B. Jordan back doing his thing. Love me some Sly Stallone. Glad to see him back. And Felicia Rashad, I mean, come on. How can you not love and adore her? So, I guess B- on Creed 2, but it was still good. I liked it.
Yeah, I think that's about. We didn't put a letter grade on it, but like it feels about where we were at. Plus or minus a little bit. So
yeah, I think we're right in the pocket there with you.
I like being in the pocket with you guys.
Some movie bear consensus.
Hey, you want to give a quick shout out to some folks who are joining us in the live chat. Sammy from Denver is here. He says, howdy, partners. Hey, Sam, glad to have you with us. And Bobby Miller is here. He says, welcome back, BH. Well, thank you, BM. Well, I'll say Bobby Miller because BM sounds like bowel movement, but glad to have you guys back with us as well. Happy holidays, guys. It's December. We started putting up one of our trees tonight. We got our Christmas BB-8 up. He's all glowy. He has a jaunty little scarf and a Santa hat. Are you guys ready for the holidays? We're trying, right?
I don't have my tree up yet. My tree is not up yet. I've got some lights that are going to go up outside the house. Haven't put them up yet. I've started lightly shopping on Amazon to, because I mean, it's way better than like trying to shop for things in person. But
how did we ever do that?
I hate crowds. I hate the whole, like, I'm going to go out and stand in line for like in a 45-minute checkout line because everyone else is shopping at the same time as me. So I love that I can just say, okay, this and that and this and that, and click and check out and order, and it shows up at my door. But no, it doesn't feel like Christmas yet. At some point, I'm gonna sit down and like watch Elf or watch
Hermits Unite.
I'm going to a Anna and the Apocalypse themed Christmas party this weekend. I think that will be my like kickoff for the holiday season.
That's awesome. Our usual kickoff, the Loft Cinema here, does a holiday sing-along where they play a bunch of clips from like movies and TV shows and music videos, and get 300 people all drunk on eggnog, dancing around with glow sticks and bells. How can you go wrong?
And some
this is mine.
Music videos.
This is mine from last year. It doesn't glow anymore, but
if you turn it around, it kind of looks, like a little obscene.
Like a penis and balls, maybe. I guess it kind of does.
Jim,
one hangs lower, so I guess that's true to life.
Describe in detail. What do you mean by obscene there, Jim?
I don't know. I lost my Tumblr. I have I have nothing to reference it to anymore.
Oh, Tumblr, man! Oh man! The whole internet is on fire about Tumblr today.
The bare parts of the internet are on it. Like,
what are we gonna do about porn, guys?
Oh goodness! Yeah,
Fuck
that's
Trump. That's all I have to say.
If only there was another place on the internet where there was pornography. If only there existed a thing on the internet. Right. If only someone anywhere on the internet had invented porn before Tumblr. I just don't know. I have no idea.
I heard that the internet is for porn, but I have no idea where else to go. So I guess the world has changed. That's my best Lord of the Rings Kate Blanchett. Anyway, we've got a fun question mark discussion for you tonight. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're going to be discussing the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the new Cohen Brothers film available on Netflix. You may have seen it, and if so, would love to hear your thoughts. If you haven't seen it yet, though, not to worry. We got you covered. We're going to share some thoughts, spoiler-free, for probably, 10 or 15 minutes, and then we will we'll give you a fair warning before we open things up to spoilers, so you can come on back a little bit later if need to. For plugs, you won't want to miss them. But guys, now that all three of us are back in the saddle again, are you ready to ride into our review of Buster Scruggs?
Yeehaw.
I'm ready.
All right. Well, then, all of that said, we're going to go ahead and jump right into our review. Here we go. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Yeehaw! Are you ready? I pulled this out of our Halloween cabinet.
Oh, I know where that came from.
What is it, Jim?
Oh, it's it's from an old Halloween costume where I was Rick Grimes of The Walking Dead.
There we go. I had to turn it. I had the
Sheriff Brad.
I heard you're not allowed to show your sheriff's badge on the internet anymore, so I turned it around earlier.
So Jim was Rick Grimes. Brad, were you Coral?
No, I was Brashone.
Okay.
Yeah, Michonne, but like with a dreads and a sword.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm here for it.
Totally.
Yeah, we won't talk about how problematic that was, but yeah, let's go.
Oh, whatever. Jim, just to educate you, sheriff's badge is another way of saying your butthole on the internet. It's a euphemism.
No, what?
I didn't. Yeah. To be fair, I didn't know that either. I
did
was
not
like,
really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know. I thought Brad had I was like, oh well, I guess there's a thing about you can only wear like a military uniform, but you have to change 3 pieces to make it.
I'm like,
I wish I could take credit for it, but I saw it on the internet. Someone referring to bleaching their butthole as polishing the sheriff's badge.
Okay.
Anyway,
I get it. It
totally get it.
And Jim, you should have known this. As a cat owner, I feel like.
Yeah, I try not. Yeah, that one's got me, man. I never heard that before, and here I am thinking that porn and law enforcement have been taken off Tumblr. But nope, it's one and the same. Polishing the sheriff's badge. I've heard of Rosebud, Starfish. I don't know. Brown eye, whatever. Yeah.
Jim, your homework assignment. I don't know. I feel it's fun to give Jim homework assignments. Jim, your homework assignment is to spend 30 minutes on Urban Dictionary just learning all of the terms, like every single
All the terms for
euphemism.
butthole.
Yeah.
There
Oh
you
my
go.
God.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Or maybe we have Chris Lopez come on the show and do some trivia with us on these terms. We broke
I
Will.
wasn't sure where that sentence
Butthole
was going.
trivia.
But you got to hear it in the Chris Lopez voice. I'm Chris Lopez, and I'm hosting Butthole Trivia on the Movie Bears podcast.
That's not his voice at
That's
all.
every episode.
I know.
Oh, you
Oh,
guys have
boy.
totally messed up the show now. Now my time index for the start of the movie review is going to actually start with butthole talk.
No. Like you really do need to have like an index. Part of the index just says polishing the sheriff badge, and just leave it like that.
That's a great idea. I
Maybe
love
I
that.
will. Maybe I will.
All right, Jim,
This is
how
why I
about
drink?
do you want me to give another intro lead into the movie, or are we okay? Are we
Yeah,
good?
we'll work it out. We'll actually start with I'll start with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs and introduce the movie. So
All right. Well, please do. And of course, remember, no spoilers for our first go round. And those of you who are listening live, not to worry. We'll give you a heads up when to step away. But Jim, tell us about this film. What is it? And what did you think?
yeah, while I bring everybody up to speed on the film, you guys can think about how we're going to tackle like the 6 chapters of the movie. But anyway, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs is a brand new Joel and Ethan Cohen movie. It's like their 26th, 28th movie or something like that. For those of you who haven't heard of the Cohen brothers, man, I'm sorry you were under that rock for so long, but we have the Cohen brothers, God, going back to, a long time, to the early 80s with movies like, like Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, Fargo, No Country for Old Men, The Big Lebowski, Oh Brother. Yeah, I said Oh Brother, we're out there. And most recently, True Grit, Inside Llewyn Davis, and Hail Caesar. So here we are. We have a movie from the Coen brothers, who are very celebrated filmmakers. They've written and directed this movie called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and it is released on Netflix. And it's I think it's also available in some cinemas, maybe in select cities, like maybe you might find it in LA or New York or something. I know it's not here in Tucson, but everybody can watch this movie on Netflix. It's what this movie is Western, kind of like Western folklore, and it's basically 6 chapters. It's like an anthology. I hesitate to say chapters because chapters almost makes it sound like the 6 parts are related as part of one story.
Short stories?
Yeah, it's like 6 short stories in a short story book, and I'm a big fan of short. Brad will tell you, like I love when I read. I prefer to read anthologies as opposed to reading like long novels. I just like the art of telling a complete story in the short format. And here we have 6 stories told by the Coen brothers, and I'm not even going to try to go through the cast on this because maybe we go. Story by story and talk about the cast in each one. I think that would be better because a lot of characters come in and out of this film. And as anthologies go, I really liked this movie a lot. I went back and watched a couple of the segments a second time. I didn't watch the whole movie all the way through, but this is a movie you definitely can do that. Once you've seen it, you can go back and like watch maybe some of the segments, because as any anthology, you're going to find that some of the stories you may like a lot, and some of the stories you may still like, but you may not like them as much, or you may not like them at all. The nature of anthologies is kind of a little uneven. Here, I will say that I I appreciated even the worst of the 6 segments, or what I would say the worst is. I would say they were pretty good, but some of the ones that I think are at the in the top half of these, I think are like top-notch stories. Some of them I think could be made into complete full-length movies on their own. So I really liked it overall. You know, I'm not a huge Cohen Brothers fan. I liked a lot of the movies they did, like Raising Arizona is one of my all-time favorite comedies. This has and we'll talk about it a little more, but this has elements of, you know, screwball comedy in it. But it also has some really serious tone. The movie's overall, I don't know if I want to even talk about it. The movie does have kind of an overall theme. All the stories have kind of an overall theme, but there's no characters that are recurring. There's no story that's recurring. Not even sure they all take place in the same setting. But I'm going to stop talking now and let you guys talk about it. I really liked it. My reaction to each piece ranges from, okay, that was pretty cool, to, oh my God, that knocked my socks off, that segment, and I wanted to see more.
All right. Well, sounds like some pretty hearty, good feelings from Jim. Will, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm the type of person that I tend to like the idea of anthologies more than I tend to like the anthologies themselves, because I like short films. I'm with you, Jim. I love a short film that can kind of get in, tell a story, and get out. But a lot of times when they're compiled into an anthology, it's like a bunch of bad short stories just kind of like lumped together because they can't stand on their own. And that's painting with a pretty broad brush, but it's unfortunately like just a trend I've noticed in anthologies. I'm very, very happy to report that The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is not in that category. I would say that, like you, Jim, of the 6 stories here, I liked all 6. I wouldn't say I loved all 6, but I did love some of these. But my least favorite of the segments was still one that I enjoyed. Each of these segments is set in the American West, and they really focus on a broad theme of like kind of the American myth, you know, whether it be like wagon trails or like the charming vagabond or like the singing cowboy or whatever like thing that comes up in like kind of American myth making and American short stories, and subverts it or turns it on its head in some way, shape, or form, usually in a way that has a little bit of pathos or is a little bit bleak. And I love that. It's a film where all of the short stories have something to say. Even if they're not all saying the exact same thing, they are moving the same general direction. Like you mentioned, this is the latest film by the Cohen brothers, who, I mean, these are some pretty serious filmmakers. I think when you with the major filmmakers, the ones that like a lot of people would appreciate as sort of like, oh, my favorite filmmakers, of course you get like Spielberg and Kubrick's and kind of those things like that. But the Coen brothers show up a lot of times in those types of discussions. These are the guys that made No Country for Old Men and Oh Brother, We're Out Thou, and Fargo and The Big Lebowski, Barton Fink, just a lot of like really great films. One of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, A Serious Man, was made by these guys. I was really disappointed when we watched Hail Caesar 2 years ago, and I didn't like it. And so it's really nice to see the Coen brothers, at least for me, return to form. So yeah, this is really good. It's on Netflix. It's only playing, like you mentioned, Jim, it's only playing New York, LA, and I think one theater in San Francisco. It's only done like $20,000 box office because they're just running it on a few screens just so that it'll qualify for like awards and stuff. This is a Netflix push. That's what they're doing. So because of that, that means that everyone listening to this right now, you don't have to drive to the nearest big city to go see this film. You don't have to wait. You can turn on your Netflix. You probably have a Netflix account or are sharing the password of someone who does. And you can watch this movie tonight. And I recommend that you do because it's pretty damn good.
All right. Well, 2 very big recommends from Jim and Will. I got to tell you, a couple weeks ago on the show, I think I mentioned I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2, and it really put me in the mood to go back and watch some Westerns. And I got to say, guys, watching this movie makes me not want to play Red Dead Redemption 2 anymore, and I definitely don't want to watch any more Western movies. I wish I had the positive experience with this movie that you guys did. I think part of the issue for me is this film is called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Technically, when you start watching the movie, the book it shows you, the full title of the book is The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and Other Tales of the American Frontier. And I don't know. I almost wish the movie had that full title, because I think part of my trouble approaching this film was the trailer. It focuses very heavy on the stupid cartoony singing cowboy thing. And so that made me really not want to see it. And Jim was like, well, now wait a minute. This is 6 short stories. Only one of them is about the cartoony cowboy thing. There's some other really good stuff in here. And my primary question was, well, if there's 6 stories and 5 of them are not about this guy, why the fuck is it called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs? And I still find myself scratching my head, I guess, at that question. Maybe it's because the title's too long. I don't know. I will say I'm really glad that was just one short story, Jim. So I'm glad you pointed that out to me, because when I thought everything would somehow involve him in some throughput line, I was about ready to put my fist through the TV. I'm just not a fan of schlocky comedy. I like some old Westerns, but I guess I like my old Westerns kind of serious. And so the other 5 stories, while not enough to totally redeem this film for me, at least they were better, but pretty fucking bleak. We'll talk more about it in spoilers, but in a month where I should be feeling happy and jovial, and this movie depressed the fuck out of me. And made me want to crawl in a hole and not be part of humanity anymore. So I guess that's saying something for this movie about, I guess, how bleak life is and how terrible people treat each other. I don't know. I'm anxious to get both your guys' take. Maybe I'm missing something. But I would say this is a pretty hard pass for me overall. Unless you're super bored, you have absolutely nothing else to do, or you're a huge Cohen Brothers fan, you're a film nerd, this is right up your alley. I don't know. It didn't really do much for me. The positives, though, that I will give, a couple of things here, were just some cast members that showed up that I appreciated. Not you, James Franco, sorry. Liam Neeson, I thought he did a good job in his role. Brendan Gleeson, was great to see him show up. Harry Potter alum, speaking of Harry Potter alums, Harry Melling, who played Duddykins. Dudley.
Yeah,
I know. I was watching this. I'm like, oh my God, is that Dudley? Holy shit, it is.
It takes a minute to recognize that it's him too.
Yeah, it really does. And I was, he kind of turned me around on that actor. I didn't think that actor ever did anything else. And so that was awesome. I recognized an actor that was in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that I really loved 30 years ago. Saul Rubinek, he played Kiva Fajo, an alien collector who kidnaps Data, the android, from the Enterprise and makes him part of his collection. So some really cool cameos here. Tyne Daly, who I love and adore. It's always great to see her show up in things. So kind of a cavalcade of cameos and appearances here. So definitely appreciated that. I think the movie is shot, aside from the first one, very beautifully, very cinematic. I would say if there's one that I absolutely love among all the others, it's the one about gold panning, and we see a guy panning for gold in the trailer. So I feel like that's safe to say. Yes. But I mean, I don't know. I know I'm being super negative. I'm trying to find positive things to talk about, but this just wasn't my cup of tea. But my tastes aren't everybody's taste. So,
and that dude's I would say for me was the standout of the performance wise. It's Tom Waite, and in the gold panning one, and he's a dude who you always forget just what an amazing actor he is. until you see him show up in a movie, and then you're reminded, and then you forget for a little bit, and then Tom Waits shows up in something else. He did a lot of stuff with like Jim Jarmusch. He did a lot of movies with him, and he was also in.
He was just in something.
He was in the Old Man and the Gun.
Oh,
with
okay.
Robert Redford earlier this year.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like it was great seeing him in this because he was just so freaking good.
I like the fact that, I mean, they've got some established actors in here, but you don't see Tyne Daly showing up in very much these days. And I like the fact that the Coens seem to want to make some startling casting choices, right? You know, Harry Melling shows up from Harry Potter. He's a totally different. I mean, he looks totally different than he did, right, in the Harry Potter movies, and not just for obvious reasons, but for other reasons as well. And he's playing a totally different character, and he's perfect for that role. Like, I don't know how they, in their mind, how they thought that, oh yeah, we got to get the kid who played what's his name in Harry Potter. We're gonna put him in that scene, but. And I've always loved Tim Blake Nelson, and Brad, I know you didn't like the character very much, but I have always loved Tim Blake Nelson in a lot of stuff, and he doesn't usually play this type of character. There's another actor that showed up in that same clip, played a character called the Kid, and he's a musician from a band that I've loved for years, and I didn't even know the guy could act, and his name is Willie. Willie Watson from Old Crow Medicine Show, and Gillian Welch and David Rawlings, Brad, who we've seen in concert, wrote the ending song of that sequence, which I kind of like. So I don't know. There's a lot. I think there's a lot in here between the six. Even Brad, who you didn't like it very much, you found some things in here to like. I think it's kind of a smorgasbord. You can hopefully pick out some things in here that you like. I think it's a tough sell though, because this is a Western, right, through and through. And I think it's really tough to sell a Western on today's audiences, especially I get the sense in our community, the gay and the bear community, I get the sense that when people see a Western, they automatically kind of like turn away and look for the next thing. I just think that Westerns don't really have the luster anymore. And so it's an interesting genre that they would pick to do this film in.
It really is. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I'm thinking about like recent Western films that have come out that I've liked. I don't know that there's even been that many Western films that have come out, but I did like True Grit, right? I thought that was very good. Also, In a Valley of Violence, I really liked, starring Ethan Hawke.
Yep.
Yeah. And I thought that was great, but those were also much more like serious, like true Western films, I would call them.
Yeah. Traditional
Western films, right? And it's a weird format, this one being 6 short stories versus like 1 main story throughput. I think, for some people, maybe that's an attractive thing. For other people, I don't know, that may make it a little less attractive. So I guess it depends on the audience and what they're looking for in a Western, if they'll see a Western.
I think we are starting to see a minor, I don't even want to say like a resurgence or a revitalization, but if I think about like 10 years ago versus now, I am seeing slightly more films that are either Westerns or have Western sensibilities. And by that, I even mean things like The Writer or Lean on Pete, which have some of those same sensibilities. Or even things like, bear with me on this, but some noir-ish type films, which borrow from like the hero's journey that's found in Westerns. Even things like John Wick reminds me very much of like a modern Western revenge story in a lot of ways. And then there's like straight up traditional Western style movies that play into like subversion and comedy, like Damsel, which came out this year. I feel that like something has changed lately, and filmmakers are, for whatever reason, coming back to this sandbox a little more than they used to. And I think a lot of it has to do with there's a sensibility with Westerns that it's sort of like this like legacy, this mythology, this like kind of this classic sense of like old school Americana type stuff. And because of the current political climate and a lot of things, people like there's a lot of artists and filmmakers who are looking to subvert exactly that, to look at mythology, look at foundation building, and find ways of looking at it sideways.
Well, it's even interesting, like if you think about, because Jim, you mentioned the gay community, to kind of burn your 2 points, Will and Jim. You think about something like Westworld on HBO. A lot of the gays have been gaga about Westworld, but now there's talk of like Westworld stuff happening outside of the Western park, and people are like, well, I'm not gonna watch, like I wasn't watching it for the Western part, I was watching it for like the robot part,
the tech part. Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder, like, it's almost like there has to be, I don't know, some kind of like hook, because Will, you mentioned John Wick kind of like being like a Western, right? Like, is something like Westworld only successful because it has a sci-fi element to it? You know what I mean? Like, do we have to transform these kinds of stories into something more modern for audiences these days to pick them up and run with them? I don't know, but you're right, Will. We're definitely seeing that trend.
Yeah, especially from the perspective of, like you mentioned, like with a twist on it, with the sci-fi twist, with a horror twist. There's been a lot of horror westerns too. Bone Tomahawk, Lasso, Mohawk, all just within the last year, 2 years. And granted, there've always been horror westerns too, but you're seeing more of them because I think filmmakers are saying, okay, well, let's go back to that, but let's do it differently. You don't see a lot of just, I want to do a very traditional square-jawed guy riding a horse, unless it's maybe one of the segments of this anthology by itself. But for the most part, you are seeing it subverted. And I think that's pretty interesting. As someone who's a big fan of science fiction, not just like the forward-looking stuff of it, but also like the way it subverts society, I kind of like that we can apply that same template to other genres.
Yeah, and the thing about this one is that it's going to be hard for, I mean, as much buzz as this one's getting because of its release, the release format, right? Release right to Netflix. It's going to be hard because a lot of other studios and stuff will look at this film and say, well, how much money, how do you measure how successful this film is? You know what I mean? Compared to other films. And are other filmmakers going to want to go out and make a Western looking to this and say, oh, well, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs made, 600 million, blah, blah, blah. And if that were the case, then maybe it would lead to a real resurgence of Westerns. But I don't know if this film is going to be able to be a model for that. I don't know.
I just wonder how many people are going to see it, and I don't know if Netflix will ever release any kind of numbers like that. But
they don't.
I'll tell you, outside of like the film critic vacuum, I don't see anybody I personally know talking about this movie. And I watched it with a friend today, and then I specifically asked a couple of other friends like about this film, and the resounding response I got was, "Oh, I saw that on Netflix, but I just scrolled past it. It didn't look interesting to me at all." And so I love the idea of something going to Netflix and being wildly accessible. I just, especially for a film like this, which, has critical merit, has lots of great things going on from a critical perspective, I just wonder how many people are actually going to watch it.
It's getting, I'd be interested in seeing the analytics, which Netflix never releases on their things. I've had a slightly different reaction in that. I've had a couple of people who are not Film Circle, like they're actually anti-Film Circle, who actually said, hey, I saw this movie, what did you think about it? And I think it's not because it's a Western. I think it's because the Cohen brothers are, they are fairly accessible critical filmmakers. Like a lot of the critic darling filmmakers that you really think about are, like your Alexander Inarritus and stuff like that. Wes Anderson or whoever, like are filmmakers who, who maybe the average person won't have seen their films, but most people can say like, oh yeah, the guys that made Fargo, the guys that made
The Big Lebowski,
the guys that made There Will Be Blood, like all of those appeal to some kind of to much more mainstream sensibilities. And I think that's part of why this one's getting any attention. I think that if this was Bob and Joe make the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, no one would be talking about this one at all. But because it's Joel and Ethan Cohen made this one, I think that's where some of the attention's coming from.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. I think you're right there, Will. I think, you know, name recognition, again, most people in the film circles are going to know that, but outside the film circle, there may be a few people who have seen those other Cohen movies, the bigger ones, and recognize the Cohens. But by and large, unless you're like Spielberg or James Cameron, I don't know. I don't think they have near the name recognition across the general sense that some of those other names do. So yeah, it is kind of a shame. The other thing that's going to keep people, I think, away from this movie is its bleakness. I mean, it is fucking bleak. And for me, I'm fine with that. I like movies that like make me feel, as I said this before, they make me feel something, even if it's a sense of despair. You know what I mean? That's okay for me, as long as it's good at doing it. Certainly there are people out there who only want to see movies who make them feel good, and that's fine, right? That's a sense, you know, a sensibility that people have. This is definitely not one of those movies. I mean, even the first segment, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, it's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, basically. You know, you have all the same kind of slapsticky, you know, sing-songy kind of things going on, but it's just really, really dark and bleak, and it just kind of gets worse. Not worse, but it gets darker.
Darker, yeah,
as it goes on.
Well, and yeah, to that point, we're not in spoilers yet, but I mean, even the happiest one of these stories is still really fucking depressing. You know what I mean? And so I think, Jim, there's something to that, definitely.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting metric which I need to share when we get to spoilers, but that like capstones exactly that point so well. But I think that is probably why the marketing, you know, by marketing I mean like the trailer, focuses so much on the titular story, is because it's the one that is the, you know, I think a lot of the other ones would come across as much darker in trailer, but instead I think the trailer primarily shows the Buster Scruggs stuff and then a little bit of the James Franco stuff, which are probably the least bleak things that you could possibly show, which makes them perfect for like a trailer. Like I would imagine there's like two of these stories that I think would be really hard to focus on the trailer, just because of how dark they are.
Can we retitle this movie to The Ballad of Scruggs Bunny?
Scruggs Bunny.
I love it. Yeah. Like this is I think opinions obviously differ on it, but I think that cartoon nature is, especially of that particular story, is one of the things that's so fun about it. And it might be one of the reasons that you don't like it as well, but it's definitely a truism. Like this, there is a hypersensibility to this that almost defies description.
Sam B in the chat, who I watched this with earlier, says anything with James Franco is pretty bleak.
So you have a James Franco lover.
Shots fired. I think he doesn't like James Franco is the point. You know?
Yeah, and that's popular. Like that's a popular opinion. I think James Franco is a popular punching bag, and
hit or miss for me,
and in some cases rightly deserved. You know, I think he does have some pretty solid works in there. I'll stand by his role as Alien in Spring Breakers, and I'll also stand by his Tommy Wiseau in The Disaster Artist. But he's an easy personality to not like, so I totally get it.
I just am glad he didn't talk much in this one. That helped it a lot for me. Yeah. Hey, listen, we've got 15 minutes left in our movie review segment, and I know we're recording later and we got to work in the morning. So do we want to go ahead and do a spoiler segment, or do we feel like with 6 short stories, that's too much?
How about we do pretty short spoiler talk? We don't have to spoil everything, but I mean, we talk about the 6 segments.
Yeah, give it like
just very briefly.
3 minutes per type thing.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well, spoilers for the Ballad of Buster Scruggs are incoming. If you value your virginal innocence where this film is concerned, this is your chance. If you're listening live, go ahead and step away. Jim, I'm thinking in my head to you, like, poking fun at my digital tape delay comment last week. But if you're listening through iTunes or Spotify or what have you, definitely feel free. Because if you're listening on those formats, the time index should be in the show notes for you by now. Go ahead and skip ahead as needed. But spoilers for the Ballad of Buster Scruggs are officially fair game. Where do you guys want to start with this one?
You want to just go in order? Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the short
that
story
makes
first?
sense. Sure.
Yeah. I think I like this one. This one's kind of in the middle of them for me. I didn't mind the slapsticky stuff too much. I like musical stuff. And this one has probably the most, even though others have some song kind of stuff in them. This one has at least a couple of different songs in it, 3 different songs that I can think of. So they've packed a lot in here musically, which I liked. As I said, I like Tim Blake Nelson. I thought there was some cool stunt kind of things going on in this one that just hadn't seen before, and I'm like, wow, that looks pretty awesome. It just kind of sets the tone, at the end for like what's coming up. It's almost like, it's interesting that they put this one up front when maybe they should have put it like in the middle, kind of as a palate cleanser for some of the other like really bleak stuff that's going on. Because this one has a lot of playful stuff in it, even though at the end it's quite bleak.
This was very middle of the pack for me as well. I think that it's a cool send up of the whole singing cowboy Western trope. Think like Riders in the Sky, that sort of thing. I thought the slapstick was actually a lot of fun in the way that they executed. If you're going to do slapstick in a Western comedy, this is how you do it. And I think that putting it up front worked really well for me because it let us get some of that out of our system. It let us say, okay, what is the myth? What is the hyper realized version of that myth? And let's pull the rug out from beneath it at the end so that we can set the stage for the rest of the stories to come. I think that if this had come in the middle, it would have been too jarring. But I think the ending of this bled, pun intended, very comfortably into the rest of the story. So yeah, middle of the pack. There's some stories I like more. There's some stories I like less.
As much as I fucking hated this one, I'm really glad it was at the beginning so that I knew it was out of the way and I didn't have to dread it watching the rest, knowing that it was like coming up later on. So there's your positive on this one.
You got it out of the way early.
You got
Which I guess brings us to story number 2, unless anyone has anything else on that. Story 2 is good. Yeah, I thought. Story 2 is Near Algodones, which is the story starring James Franco, where he is this charming outlaw who is constantly getting out of scrapes. When he's about to get hung, it doesn't quite go through until it finally catches up to him. And so this was actually my least favorite of the 6 stories, only because I felt like the story didn't have enough room to really go anywhere. Nothing against James Franco on this one. I thought he didn't save the performance. He didn't hurt the performance. He was fine, whatever. But I felt like this one, the story just didn't have as much room to really go anywhere
I'm with you, Will. I think this one was kind of underwritten. Like there wasn't really much going on in this. There was some kind of shootout battle stuff and some some interesting things they did in stunt work and some cinematography, but otherwise I didn't think there was really much to this one. It's kind of forgettable.
I like this one for nothing that was actually in the movie really, but was the just this one moment that I actually did in Red Dead Redemption 2 back when I still wanted to play that game, where I had to save somebody who was like hanging from a noose. And I thought I'd be all cool and like shoot the rope instead of like just walking up to him and hitting the button to cut him down. And I did the same thing. He was like swaying back and forth in the game, and it took me like 3 bullets to get him down. And then one of the characters in the game is like, why didn't you just cut him down? Which I loved. And so it was a little bit funny watching that same scenario play out.
It was almost exactly the same.
It pretty much was. Yeah. And so it got me thinking like, did Rockstar like, put that in their game knowing this was coming? I don't know. It was just so eerily similar that it'd be programmed almost the same way. You know what I mean? But that was kind of fun, I guess.
I mean, both are fun. Both of that game and this movie are both send-ups of the Western genre, and so it makes total sense that 2 separate writers would say, "Oh yeah, this is the thing that happens in these movies all the time, where someone just like crack shot takes out a rope. Well, what happened if he comically misses a few times?" So it's one of those things where it's kind of weird that it happened 2 times, twice in a row, but at the same time, like I can get how it happens if 2 people are kind of thinking through the writing process similarly.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was still kind of fun. I chuckled at it. Yeah. So that was a positive, definitely.
Yeah. So that brings us to
Meal Ticket,
which,
yep,
man, this one was, I loved almost everything about this, but again, this one was so dark. Like unrelentingly bleak this movie was, with even a bleaker ending. Liam Neeson plays kind of a huckster traveling showman who goes around the West in his with his like stagecoach, which turns into this little theater where he has a traveling companion, a limbless actor played by Harry Milling, who basically delivers like oratory, soliloquies and Bible readings and readings
from
the Constitution. Yeah. And he basically, just with his voice and his performance, captures the attention of the audience and, of course, earns money for the 2 of them as they travel around the country. And then ultimately at the end is replaced by a chicken.
Which... Not just replaced, but like fucking thrown off a cliff to die, right. And a chicken that can, calculate numbers takes his place.
Right. But just the existence, as the thing went along, it starts out, he does a show, there's a reasonable crowd, and then it tapers off, and it's like, you have this, and then one of the last shows he gives is like 3 people that are uninterested, they make no money, and you get the sense of like impending doom, like something's got to give. And you just felt so awful for both of these people, even though the Liam Neeson character obviously is not a great person. We don't really know anything about the limbless guy. We don't know his name. We don't know anything. I don't think he utters a single word of dialogue other than his performance on the stage, which I'm sure is by design. But it's this one was really tough to watch.
It's very bleak. I mean, we keep saying that word, but I think when I think about that term in relationship to this movie, I'm usually thinking about this specific short. I feel like this is the one that just feels like, man, just the downerest of downers. I mean, Melling's performance is so good, but what I love so much about this is that there's a cool little metaphor that ties into very closely with almost Netflix's platform in general, as it is, of here is this verbose and powerful presentation by this orator, and it gets increasingly less reaction until the point that that's put out to pasture for kind of cheap and easy entertainment. And I almost think about like Netflix's own algorithm. They've got to be watching the numbers and going like, well, are people watching this highbrow drama, or are they watching this like this new reality show, or this new cake program, or this new whatever it happens to be, teen drama that they're coming out with. Like, and it's not just Netflix, but Netflix made this, so I got to tie it back to it. But And it's sad because I think it's the way almost anything goes. I think that, challenging content is always going to be inaccessible to the masses. So the thing that's going to be most accessible are things that have the least sharp edges. Maybe the least flavorful stuff is the most palatable, and that sometimes is a little sad.
There's definitely that message, I think, in the way this one played out. But yeah,
well, it's interesting to me because like I think about and Sam is alluding to this in the chat as well. He says, I thought it was a metaphor for how old time entertainment is more complicated. Newer forms of entertainment are so simple and almost silly. I think a lot about memes. And don't get me wrong, Jim will attest, I fucking love to create memes. I think they're fun. But like, I think about like, I don't know, I used to type a nice long message out to people and express my thoughts on Facebook or whatever. And like, that would get like a 2-word response from somebody. But boy, if you send a funny meme or a meme that really nails it, you really get them talking. They fucking love it. Right. And so I almost wonder like if that's the way society is going now. Right. You think about it, like we started out as cavemen painting on walls. Then we became great orators and wonderful literature. And now our primary form of fucking entertainment is memes and cat videos online. So like, thinking about this one, it is bleak. I think that's the perfect word to use. But I think there's a powerful message there about maybe not letting yourself fall prey, I guess, to the too easy kind of thing. Not that I want all Shakespeare all the time. It'd be fun to have a blend of the two. But when you think about how disposable people are, if they're not giving you what you want or need, that is pretty powerful. So I really like this one. I think Liam Neeson did a phenomenal job here. Henry Melling, again, almost unrecognizable at first. And then I was like, wait, is that Dudikins doing Shakespeare? Okay, I'm on board.
Jim, yes or no? Is chickens doing math equal to superhero movies?
I mean, you could look at it that way. You could look at it as what do you call it? What do you call it? The screen life movies or something, anything like that, where I don't know. It depends, I guess. It's the dumbing down. It signifies it's trying to parallel kind of the dumbing down of, our entertainment, I guess, a little bit.
It's hard. I say superhero movies because that's the thing I generally hear. I still love superhero movies, but at the same time, I am cognizant of the fact that usually the themes are worn on their sleeve and they don't require a lot of thinking and a lot of effort. Yeah. And sometimes that I do I'm cognizant of the fact that dulls the way that I look at media. And so that's a hard thing to parse. And I think that this short does a good job of trying to parse that.
Yeah. And this obviously in a short like this, it doesn't really explore that very much, but obviously replaced by a fake counting chicken that really can't count,
Right. Indeed. Well, speaking of, things that glitter, let's move on to the third story, All Gold Canyon, which featured Tom Waits as a prospector in this beautiful mountain valley. I don't know if it was Montana. It kind of looked like it. I don't know. Some cool wildlife here, but this was my favorite story out of all of them. And I think it's the happiest story, but it's still pretty depressing, which is saying something. Basically, Tom Waits. What?
I was going to say, I'm not sure if it was the happiest story. It was the only one where I think the protagonist or one of the main protagonists ends up alive at the end.
That was the metric I mentioned in the pre-spoiler section. It's the only one where the main character survived.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, it was beautiful. This one was beautifully filmed, although it had a weird kind of artificial gloss to it, didn't it? Or was that just me? Did things look kind of almost like the whole thing was like CGI'd or something. Even the animals at one point, like the owls and stuff like that, looked like they may have been CGI'd in there. Maybe that was just me. I'm like, I mean, this looks really beautiful, like beautiful cinematography, but is it real? I was asking myself, that question. Do you guys get the sense of that at all?
It looked very idyllic, like very beautiful, over the top beautiful. It almost reminded me of one of those cartoons where at the beginning, like it plays like, I don't know if this is going to make sense. But I remember a lot of cartoons when I was growing up. Like there was usually like a very peaceful song that was playing while the character was sleeping, and you'd see shots outside of like the deers playing and the birds flying overhead, and like everything was peaceful to an over-the-top degree, and then some loud noise would like cause whatever the crisis of the cartoon was. And that's what this felt like this valley at this like level of peace and tranquility that wasn't just like still, it was like teeming with life in this way that like obviously was intruded upon by
Virgin.
Brad, I know you mentioned that this was your favorite. What were your standout moments?
Oh, hey, I'm still here. My standout moments, I guess, were just focusing on the like effort he was making to try and like find the source of the gold, the pocket, if you will, as he kept calling it. It was interesting to see him, like, oh, he's got one little gold piece, and then he'd like throw it away back in the water, and then 3 little gold pieces, and then 1. I'm like, what is he doing? Because I've never really prospected gold. You can do that in Red Dead Redemption 2, but I haven't bothered to do that. I know nothing about it. And then when it finally sort of comes together and you figure out exactly what's going on, I'm like, oh, cool. Like I learned something. And I was so happy when he finally found that pocket. Tom Waits does such a great job, I think, of just expressing joy, not even so much like through what he's saying as he's talking to himself, but just like in his eyes and like how he kind of moves. He has like a little jaunt in his head motions sometimes. And so I was so thrilled for him. And I'm like, yay, something happy's going on. But then I'm like, wait a minute, what movie am I watching? Oh, right, this isn't going to last. And so then, of course, we see the shadow and you just know, okay, something bad's happened. Someone has found him. And sure enough, there's a dude up there who shoots him. But then like he's laying on, the floor of the pocket or whatever. He's bleeding. And I'm like, fuck, this sucks. This is so depressing. And then I'm like, wait a second. That's not the side of the body that the heart is on. He's okay. He's got to be all right, right? And then the dude is like rolling his cigarette and he's smoking a cigarette. And I'm like, I bet he's playing possum. And sure enough, when the dude jumps down there, a fight ensues and the prospector kills the guy, gets to take some of his gold at least. And he'll be back for it. The rest that he maybe didn't get. He's moving pretty good for someone who was just shot, through the abdomen. But I was really happy to see that, it had kind of a happy ending. And Will, to your point about the pleasant music over the idyllic landscape, that like da 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 da.
Yes, exactly.
Right. It was fun for me to see it come full circle as he's like walking back into the woods, right? We get the deer again. We get the owl like perched up in the tree, who was like totally casting owl shade like the whole time. It was kind of a neat bookend. I really like this one a lot.
The one thing that made it feel like bleak after the fact for me was I loved the bookend. I loved how this was almost my favorite. There was one story I liked a little bit more, but this was like neck and neck. But I loved the way that like it came back around to peaceful. And then I thought at the end, just like, well, shit, he's going to probably come back, right? Like we know how this story played out, right? There was probably within a year, like a gold mining like settlement that propped up there, and like the trees started getting logged and like things started growing, and that idyllic landscape is probably gone within a year or two's time as more and more people do the gold rush. So that's where it got bleak for me, was not the context of the film itself, but just sort of thinking like, oh man, this is going to get disturbed again, isn't it? Like the fact that there was a survivor means that more people are going to come back for more gold at some point.
Unless you choose to believe another story, and that's that he never tells anybody where the gold is from, and he returns every few months, to pull enough out and live off of for the rest of his life without destroying it. Maybe he puts a cabin there. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it looks so beautiful. And when he started like tearing it up, and I'm like, he's just one dude. Like, what happens in like 20 years when, like you said, Will, the first settlement comes in here and this is all gone and no more owls, deer, anything. I mean, we know how this goes. But I don't know. In my mind, I kept coming back to that. Maybe I'm just too much of a tree hugger or something. I don't know.
This is a good, like, glass half empty, glass half full type litmus test. Like, is the last shot of that short, like, optimistic or is it a downer?
Why not both?
Why not both?
Yeah. Jim, I totally cut you off. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, you didn't. That's what I was going to say. It's I think this did have kind of a sort of environmentalist or conservationist undertone in there. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. I haven't read anything about it, but it seemed like it did because, you have this pristine valley, seemed like it was untouched by human hands. And then you see certain shots with like, would come back to the river and show the river. And every time it came back, there were more like piles of dirt and holes in the ground, showing where he was digging the whole place up. And for a while there, I thought that's where it was going. It was the whole place was going to be dirt by the time he was done.
There's probably an IKEA there now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Boulder, Colorado IKEA. That's where it is.
Maybe. Well, hey, we're quickly running out of time. We still got a couple more to talk about. So are you guys good with moving on to the gal who got rattled?
Yes. Please.
All right, let's do it. Go for it.
This one was my favorite one, called The Gal Who Got Rattled. It was about basically this Zoe Kazan plays this woman. I forget her name. Was it Alice? I forget what her name was. And she was on a wagon train that was heading through the West to Oregon. At some point, she had some promise of maybe marrying a guy and making a life out there. And she meets one of the wagon train leader cowboy guys, and they strike up a really nice little romance. It was very, I don't know how to put it, like a really earnest friendship and I thought a really sweet romance. And I'm like, this is kind of a different in tone for this thing. And then, of course, at the end, they're attacked. And, a big fight ensues and ends in tragedy with her thinking that they were overrun and going to be murdered. And she does what the guy told her to do, which, if she felt that way, which was basically to shoot herself and kill herself. And that's kind of the way it ends. And what I thought was awesome about this was, so the framing device of the movie is pages in a book, right? In a short story book. And this was the one that really stuck out to me because I don't know if you guys were reading along, but I read along the last line. It said he didn't know what he was going to say to Billy Knapp. You know what I mean? And that was just like really drove home. That was like a punch in the gut. It brought home the tragedy there. This was the longest of the stories, I think. Maybe you could say the slowest because it's, it definitely played out very slowly. But I really love this. I thought the performances by Kazan and I'm trying to remember the cowboy's name. Was it Camp? No, Bill Heck was his name.
Bill Heck, yes.
Bill Heck, who I had never heard of before, and I thought his performance in here was one of the best in the whole movie.
Yeah, this is my favorite segment. I think that it told a very complete narrative, and I think that's the thing that drew me most towards it. This was a great performance from Zoe Kazan. It was an exemplary performance from Bill Heck. Like, if it wasn't for Tom Waits kind of stealing the movie for me, I would say that Bill Heck was my standout. I loved the story. I loved the tragedy of it. I loved the tenderness of it as well. And tying it back to the overarching theme of our podcast, Bill Heck is someone who is worth checking out. He was in an LGBTQ film that came out in 2013 called Pit Stop. It's really good. It's by Yin Tan, the guy that did 1985, which we saw at South by Southwest. Yeah. So Bill Heck has a history in LGBTQ film, and David Lowery actually wrote the script on that too. So it might be up a few of our alleys, but yeah, this was such a good segment. I loved it.
Especially good here was that the dog really was the ultimate reason all of this terribleness happened.
Yep. The dog that, that damn dog. I don't know. Trouble.
Wouldn't shut up.
Barking all the time. And then they tried to get rid of it. It came back. She ended up finally, I think, whereas early on you got the sense that she didn't really care too much about the dog. Right. And then she ended up caring enough about it to go chase it down and bring it back. And she was having a wonderful moment with it just before all the tragedy started.
And not only that, I mean, she played a role in her own demise, I guess, because he's like, hey, no, stop. Like, we have to go. No, like, stop laughing at the dog. Like, come on. And she's like, oh, it's so great. He's so funny. And like, if she had just listened, they could have turned around on their horses and got out. Maybe. So it makes it even sadder because you think about, like, you know, we love our pets. We love the cute things that our pets do. But in this day and age, we don't live in a world where, like, some crazy person can just show up and lead a war party to kill you while you're laughing at what your pet is doing. Right. So it makes me glad that we can take those funny cat videos from the safety of our own home.
Yeah. It reminded me a lot of, there's one of the subplots in Saving Private Ryan reminded me a lot of that, like where there's a choice that a character makes early in the film that ultimately spells their own demise later on in the film. And you get to see that play out here as well. So yeah, very tragic.
I love how your protection of spoilers line for that movie describes like 95% of every movie ever. Well,
yeah, it's like, you know, I don't want to spoil Saving Private Ryan for the 3 people that haven't seen it yet.
I adore you, Will. That was awesome. All right. Hey, this was a really good one, too. I agree with you guys. This is probably my second favorite one in the whole thing. I know I made fun of her and the dog, but like it was a very poignant story. And I just, you know, I knew like after he got hit by the dude that was like, I guess, hanging off his horse so you couldn't see him. I also heard a gunshot and I was like, wait, where did the gunshot come from? Is that one of the Indians? Like, you know, like Native Americans, I guess, indigenous peoples, like in the background, like, where's that coming from? And then I heard the dog bark and I'm like, oh God, oh no, please tell me this isn't true. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So very poignant, very bleak. But I mean, it tugged on my heartstrings. It made me feel something. And I appreciated that.
And that was one point. You did mention one other thing that's like at least worth noting that I think the film could have done something different with, in that in all that it subverted, it did not do a really good job with subverting the indigenous peoples as bloodthirsty savages trope. It played very firmly into that as opposed to subverting like so much of the rest of this film did. So I think that that's something that while I think it worked for this story because they were definitely set as the antagonist, it almost would have made sense for one of these 6 stories to maybe subvert that trope in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, a couple of these stories went in that direction, Will. That was a strange choice, I thought, for this movie that definitely kind of pegged the meter totally on one side of that, of what they could have done. And they didn't. And I think there's been some heat thrown at this movie for that.
And rightly so. I mean, I think that it's one thing to play into a trope or stereotype because it fits the genre. I totally get that. Like, but at the same time, this film is very actively deconstructing mythology. And if you're going to deconstruct mythology and not even approach that, then that means that there's there's probably something else you could have done in the writing, to the point where like this is not making like my top 10 or my top 25 list. And I think that it possibly could have if it had maybe dropped near Algodones and done something else and like along these lines in that slot.
This is a hard one. I don't even know how you would do that. Like if you want to include something that was a major source of conflict at the time, you know, how do you do it in a way that is like respectful and not stereotypical and not tropeful, but like still have that like time period specific conflict? You know, I don't know if you just avoid that entirely and make all your stories about like white guys killing white guys. You know, I don't even know how you would do that. And I almost wonder if that's why, like, you know, a lot of Westerns aren't being made these days. You know what I mean? Because you don't know how to approach that anymore. I mean, is there a way that you fix that beyond just avoiding it entirely?
There could have at least been some kind of mention about, the white settlers, you know, taking over areas that, you know, had belonged to the native people, and what was driving their, you know, their sense of revenge or whatever. But there was nothing there. I mean, this wasn't what that wasn't what this movie was about, and that's why we didn't get it. I get that, but it did make it definitely more one-sided.
And to be fair, I'm not defending it. I'm just asking what the solution is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think for me, the closest thing to a solution is, I think if you're going to have these types of tropes, it's okay when you're, again, leaning heavily into the genre. But when you have 6 short stories to play with, when you make all 6 of them from the white settlers' perspective only, and you don't, and you use the natives as the antagonists to 2 of the stories, then I think that you're missing an opportunity. I think you could have easily, there's a couple of stories here that if you had done a story from the opposite perspective, even if it's not fully balanced, even if it's 1 story versus 5, I still think that does subvert the story. Like you take one of the stories and you subvert the idea of the the bloodthirsty savage in some way, shape, or form. I think that does that speaks volumes. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for an effort sometimes in these, and I don't think an effort was made here.
Yeah, I don't think that's really what the Cohen brothers really wanted or cared about doing. But I will say my favorite episode of Westworld is the one that is entirely from the perspective of the indigenous peoples and what's going on with their conflict and their struggle. I think about movies like Last of the Mohicans, you know what I mean? I think does a really good job of demonstrating some of that. So, this wasn't the movie they were trying to make, but I mean, I can definitely see your point. That may have helped out a little bit. Well, we've got one more to talk about before we wrap this mother up. The Mortal Remains was the final story here. A bunch of people in the stagecoach talking for 25 minutes. What did you guys think of this one?
Yeah, this is, to me, I know they decided to end on this, and I think more because it kind of wrapped up the thematic elements of the movie in a pretty in-your-face way. It felt really weird to me. This felt more like something you'd see like in a horror movie or something. You have 5 people in a stagecoach. A couple of them are what do they call them? Collectors of souls or whatever.
Reapers or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And obviously they're shepherding these people along their way to their ultimate end. And they get to the end, and it's do they get to ascend the staircase or not? And it was all very symbolic, and I think they were trying to do something thematically here. This one probably didn't work for me. Probably this might have been the weakest one of them for me, and it's a shame because it comes on the end and it didn't really kind of nail the whole movie down for me. So yeah, wasn't a fan of the Mortal Remains one that much, even though great, like you said, seeing Tyne Daly, seeing Brendan Gleeson in here, I expected a little more, and we just got a very weird and not fulfilling story for me.
Of the 6 stories, there's only the one that I didn't care for, and that was the Near Algodones. I like I said, I still kind of liked it, but it felt very weak. Of the remaining 5, I very much liked all 5 of those, and that includes this one, although this is my least favorite of those 5. So rank that how you will.
Rank
I guess
number 5.
Yeah, this is rank number 5, but it's probably like, it's a high 5.
High 5.
I think it does a really good job of pulling together what is the theme of, like, one of the themes of this film, like, which is, all of these mythologies all have their proximal end. Like, all of these characters are on a journey to meet their maker, and here this last story is very much these characters are on a journey to meet their maker, in a more literal way than the rest of the story, the characters that have appeared in the different shorts. I liked the dialogue that happened between the characters. I liked the way that their stories sort of point and counterpointed with one another. I liked the whole like purgatory slash their
halfway house,
reapers of the dead, as opposed to like just like bounty hunters like they originally thought they were, reveal at the end. It's the only thing that's sort of a bummer for me is just like it was a good short, but there are 4 much stronger shorts that were also in this film, and so technically this ended on a weak point, even though I still liked the short, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I wanted my favorite. I wish this was my favorite one, because I'd love to go out on like the highest note possible.
Yeah, I gotta say this one wasn't great for me either. I mean, I do love Tyne Daly. It was great to see her pop up here. She didn't really have a whole lot to do besides, go all, have her hysterical moment. But it was good to see her. Brendan Gleeson, I love Brendan Gleeson. I actually enjoyed him in this part. He had a little bit of like thumping fun. I like when he was like, yeah, I thump people pretty good. I was like, I know several people who'd like to be thumped by you, Brendan Gleeson. But I mean, I don't know. This was definitely a dour note to go out on. And I almost wonder if this would have worked well as the first one, because there's this neat moment where, like, after they take the dead body inside, the other 3 people in the stagecoach are almost like afraid to go into the hotel. They're like afraid to go further. And I think if this were first in the lineup, it would be like this whole, like, I'm almost afraid to go deeper in the movie, but like it's creepy enough and weird enough that like I want to see what happens next. It might have been kind of a cool like kickoff lead in.
Book ended with the first spot with Buster Scruggs, where like the ending of that, like the character just is very much accepted straight into the afterlife. What if we had swapped the two and we had started with Mortal Remains, where the characters were had some concern, and then end with a more over the top story where a character just kind of like waltzes right in? I wonder if that would change the perception of those two for better, for worse, or whatever.
I don't know. Would be interesting to see. Yeah. Maybe someday someone will recut it in like different orders,
like something. We do with the Star Wars prequels and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you take Buster, like in that first piece, if you take everything of him out after he dies, like in the street, and maybe at the end on this one, you have them hint that it's actually his body, like that they're carrying to the end. That would have been a good way to tie it all together. And now it is the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I don't know.
That would make so much sense. Oh my God.
But who am I to try to
you need to be the third
Cohen Brothers.
Yeah. You need to be the third Cohen brother, obviously.
Jim.
I'm Cohen Pugliafico. Cohen Pugliafico.
Jim Cohen-Offico.
I love it.
Anyway, that could have worked maybe, or it could have been too stupid.
Yeah.
Who knows?
All right. Well, guys, it's late. I know it's late. How about we wrap up with some quick plugs? Are we on board?
Sure.
Yes.
All right. Mine is real fast. It's no secret on this podcast how much I fucking love The Lion King. I really can't wait for the live action version. Well, live action, I guess CGI action that's coming out. But a new 4K restoration version of The Lion King is coming out as of tomorrow. And I'm really pumped for this. Jim, I know The Lion King isn't like your favorite thing ever, but I really want to go back and watch this in 4K. I mean, it was so beautiful already, and they did a high definition remaster several years back that cleaned a lot of things up and looked really pretty. But man, I am just like Mr. Burnsing at the idea of watching this in 4K. So I'm pumped. I think it's going to be a great primer for the Lion King CGI action film that's coming up. I can't wait. So definitely, if you're a fan of the Lion King and you want to see it maybe in a new way that's even more beautiful, check it out tomorrow. All right. Jim.
It's in theaters, you said?
It's coming out on Blu-ray.
Oh,
VOD.
I mean, it's going in my collection. I love The Lion King. Younger Will may have spent a lot of time on like animation and like Lion King like message boards when he first discovered the internet, because he was like super into like the movie, because kids are dumb. But no, I'm right there with you. No, not kids are dumb for liking the Lion King, but just like just kids, the way they access material on the internet. Like I think back just like, God damn, I guess this is weird. But anyway, it's like but no, I'm right there with you. Like it's a great, it's a legit great movie. And just seeing it in the crispest version possible is, I can't wait.
I know that you think I hate The Lion King, babe, but that is not true. I don't hate it. I have some resentment toward it, but I think it's a wonderful movie. So
okay,
that's where I sit.
You have resentment towards The Lion King?
All I know is every time The Lion King comes up, you roll your eyes. You can explain why briefly. That'd be a whole nother show.
Did you apply for like a position and The Lion King like got your job? Did it like get the last like cookie at like let the lunch at the break room or something like that? Like, what did The Lion King do to hurt you, Jim?
Oh, it was basically, I feel that it's a blatant borrow from Kimba the White Lion, which was one of my favorite animated shows as a kid, from the 60s and early 70s. And Disney never acknowledged it, even though it's obvious there are some things that they lifted directly from the Kimba the White Lion, like Simba.
That's fair. I would also kind of argue though that that's probably like every other Disney movie. The same.
Yeah.
Like their Disney is like the original remix artist.
Yeah. That's all. That's it's fairly, and it's more in fun than anything else, but it does stick in my craw a little bit that happened. And people will say, no, that's not true.
Understandable.
It happens.
All right. Well, Jim, if you're not plugging The Lion King, what are you plugging this week?
I'm going to plug a movie that I got to see called Wildlife. It is the Paul Dano, who we know as an actor, who we really like. He was in Okja, and he's been in. He was in a Cohen Brothers movie, There Will Be Blood. He was in There Will Be Blood. So also. This movie Wildlife was written by Paul Dano and his wife Zoe Kazan, who was in The Gal Who Got Rattled. She's Alice. So she wrote. She was one of the writers on this movie Wildlife. This one stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Carey Mulligan, and a young actor named Ed Oxenbould. Basically, three main characters. It's about a family. Jake Gyllenhaal and Carey Mulligan character are married, a married couple with a teenage son, played by Ed Oxenbould, and they're going through some family trouble. It's basically a family drama and a coming of age movie. I know we have a lot of those. This one was really well done. The performances are all great. The writing is sharp. And I recommend it. It's called Wildlife, and it's in theaters right now.
So good. We'll probably, there's a chance we may be talking about that one later this year.
Maybe.
All right. Awesome. Will, how about you? What have you got?
So first of all, keep checking our website and our social media page, everyone. I do written reviews from time to time on our website, and from time to time usually is pretty sporadic, but there's a large chunk of written reviews coming out pretty soon. Things like If Beale Street Could Talk, On the Basis of Sex, Mary Queen of Scots, Vice are all going to be hitting our website. So please keep an eye out for those. But the film that I'd like to recommend people watch is a film that is available on Amazon Prime. So if you have Amazon Prime for your shipping needs around Christmas, you can also watch this movie for free right now. It's called Madeline's Madeline, which is a hell of a name. It's a very experimental film by director Josephine Decker, who is most known for being in that documentary The Artist is Present, where the woman sits there in the Museum of Modern Art. One woman kind of storms in and like strips down naked and then gets like carried out by security guards. That's her. That's the director of this film. And it's about this this young, like 16-year-old biracial girl. Madeline is this, Madeline is the 16-year-old biracial girl who has a history of mental illness, but gets really involved in this super immersive performance art troupe. And her mother is trying to connect to her and just can't. And her troupe leader kind of finds out about her mental and emotional scars and starts to exploit those for the sake of the performance. Like guys, like experimental films are usually super hard to get into, and most of the time they are tedious, excruciating, hard things to watch, and I tend to skip them. They're just not for me. Madeline's Madeline has an emotional throughput that is very readily apparent. It's super well acted, super well performed, super well shot. One of the stronger films of the year. It's Madeline's Madeline. I can't stop saying Madeline's Madeline because it's so fun to say Madeline's Madeline, but it's on Amazon Prime. You should check it out.
Going to. It's been on my list for a while. Just haven't got to it yet, but I will.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us up for this week. I know we recorded on a special night outside of our norm. Unfortunately, I am working again the normal night that we record. So for those of you who joined us live, Bobby Miller, Sammy from Denver, Sam from here in Tucson, and a couple other folks were here Jordan, who was here earlier. Great to have you folks with us. For those of you who are listening through iTunes or Spotify, even though you weren't here for the live broadcast, which means you missed me wearing Jim's awesome Rick Grimes cowboy hat. We adore you folks too and hope that you've enjoyed the show. We would love to continue our conversation with you in between episodes on social media. Jim, if people want to get in touch, how can they do so?
Find me on Twitter, my account at JJP Out West. That's all one word, JJP Out West. And you can find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico, also.
All right. Awesome. And Will, how about you?
Yeah, please follow me on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove. You can find me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis. I'd love to connect with you there. You can find me on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com. Just look for William Lindis. It's where I go to log films that I've seen throughout the year. I will hit my 400th of the year this week. I don't know what it's going to be, but I hope it's not something shitty. You can also find me on Tumblr at Oh, shit.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Like the error 404. There's nothing here. Sorry. Never mind.
Can we just have a moment of silence, everyone, for Tumblr? Goodbye, Tumblr.
And Filmstruck.
Well, more so Tumblr, but yes, Filmstruck. Tumblr, you've given us so much over the years, and we try to give back to you, but we aren't allowed to anymore. So thank you for everything. Okay, anyway, bye Tumblr. Hey, if you guys want to find me online, you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has some bear, chub, chaser, etc. friends in common with you. You can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro. Folks, it's been awesome. We will see you all next week. Have a great time, everyone, and happy start of the Christmas and Hanukkah and all the other holiday seasons. Be safe. Love each other. See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Pour one out for Tumblr, snuffed out like a candle in the wind.
Bye-bye.
Are we going to have an Elton John commemorative song?
Your Tumblr burned out long before your free porn ever will.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.